I have a very special video for you all today. I interviewed Alex Dracott, the founder and creative director of Ironwood Studios, the team currently working on Pacific Drive. I put in timestamps for all my questions, so feel free to skip around to whatever interests you. And to get things started, could you give us an overview of Pacific Drive, maybe what people should know if they've never heard of the game before?
Yeah, sure thing. Pacific Drive is a run-based driving survival game where you and this old station wagon are stuck in an exclusion zone, so a part of Washington State in the U.S. that no one is allowed into for, mysterious reasons, and you are taking these trips out from your garage with the station wagon to gather supplies and kind of figure out this mystery of what's going on, and then coming back to the garage and fixing up your car and then going out and doing it again.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about your kind of history in the game industry and how we got to this point.
I've been in games for over 10 years now. I started out very much focused on the art side of things. I was an environment artist down at Sony Online Entertainment in San Diego, where I worked on PlanetSide 2. Then I moved up to Seattle, where I've actually been ever since, where I worked on Infamous Second Son and First Light over at Sucker Punch. And then from there, I spent a couple of years bouncing around, freelancing on different projects, kind of focusing more on the technical artistry side of things, the special effects and lighting, before joining up with Oculus, where I was their evangelization team's VFX lead for almost 4 years, around 3.5 years. And then in fall of 2019, I left Oculus, and shortly after, Ironwood was born. And we have definitely grown and ramped up since then. We're going to turn 4 years old this November, and that is a little crazy to say out loud because time flies very fast.
So, is Pacific Drive kind of like your dream game that you've always wanted to make, or did the idea come about more recently?
It's certainly not an idea that I had in my head for like 10 years or something like that.
Yeah.
The last couple of years while I've been, living in the Northwest, I was getting back into this habit that I did when I was younger of going out and visiting, weird abandoned spots and old collapsed mines and, just generally exploring the area. And while I was doing that, I was doing a lot of it just driving around by myself, and there was just something to the mood and the vibe of driving the Pacific Northwest in a car, listening to music in the rain and the fog, and it got me thinking about that experience and wanting to share that with people. And I think that was the very initial idea, and then from there it slowly progressed through iteration to where Pacific Drive is today. Like initially the game wasn't even actually going to be run based. I think when we were first talking about it, it was a little bit more of a traditional uh you know open setup for the game. But that idea of, well, if you've got this car and you want to fix it up, you need a place to fix it up, and going on road trips started to land with that. And very quickly those early prototypes became like, oh my gosh, like we've got something, like this is the one, so to speak.
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty unique game. I remember you announced the game at a Sony State of Play event, and I don't even have a PlayStation, but for some reason I was watching it and I can't remember any of the other games, but I definitely remember Pacific Drive.
That's great to hear. Yeah, we were among awesome company. We actually did not know what other games would be shown at that event, only that we would be in it, and so we were a little, floored to be alongside so many awesome games and IPs. And it was great to just finally share the game, because at that point, we had been working on it for a while, and so that first reveal trailer was a big moment for the studio.
Yeah, I'm sure. And one of the first things kind of stood out to me about Pacific Drive were all of the gadgets that kind of light up the dash. Can you kind of walk us through what some of those do?
Yeah, absolutely. Behind the steering wheel, obviously you've got gas and speed. That's obvious. That's important. And above that, there's a status display box, right? This is your standard warning lights that you get with any kind of car, where we can tell you if, yeah, hey, there's something a little wrong. Like, take a look there. Those are the most immediate things that the player needs to know. Then, as you move over to the right, there is a little monitor that shows the current radiation amount that the car is sitting in, which is important. And then kind of taking the place of the center console is both the display that shows the parts of the different defensive aspects of the car, so all the panels and doors, and then there's also like a cumulative representation of the health of the car, because when the car is in enough of a damaged state, the player is vulnerable. And that's a core part of the game, right? Is that you are taking care of this car, but this car is taking care of you. Um, and then, moving over, you've got the map, which we use for a variety of things, kind of a couple of different ways that we're communicating the high level state of danger for the area that you're in. And I won't spoil everything, but there's a couple little surprises in there for people to poke around the car. We weren't able to go 100% every single knob can be like turned and flipped. But there is still, for sitting in a car, there's a lot of stuff that you can poke. You've got, wiper blades and headlights. There's the radio up and to the right. There's even like a courtesy light, that you can turn off and on. And those are all, I think like definitely trying to capture the spirit of, there's all these parts of this car. You've got the be able to put it in drive and park. You've got the key, which you have to turn to start the car. We wanted to create enough of that, fantasy fulfillment of like, I'm actually responsible for, taking care of this vehicle. And part of that is knowing all the knobs and switches, and some of that coming a little bit to muscle memory. In fact, it's actually funny because, we're making a game. We've iterated on the layout of the car a few times, right? Where we'll move one thing to a different location and shift stuff around. And if it's been long enough since we've done it, everyone on the team gets a little bit thrown because we've got to like relearn the muscle memory of like, oh, right, yep, it's over there now. Like I now know exactly what is over there, but it happens pretty quickly. You get pretty accustomed to that ritual of getting into the car, which is fun. That's part of getting to know an older vehicle, right?
Yeah, for sure. And when I found out that there's going to be different parts of the driving experience that were more manual, like you said, turning the key in the ignition, I was really excited because I love when games kind of have that attention to detail and those little bits that make everything feel more special.
Absolutely. And you definitely become, intimately familiar with this car and all the things that can go wrong with it. It's a it's the game, right? Like it's the thing that makes us special, right? There are a lot of games that tell stories set in, weird exclusion zones, but for having a card that has so many different parts that you can swap out, it's important. Like we put a lot of care and attention into just about every part of it that we could.
And what about the garage? Because it seems pretty important that we're upgrading our car and everything. So, will we get access to different tools as we progress in the game? Will we unlock different upgrades at certain points?
Let's see. So the high level response is like, yeah, you're definitely improving the garage. There's a variety of different stations that you can install. And those stations all have different functionalities. Some of them are very straightforward, like, I can now, customize this thing I couldn't customize before, or very simply just hold more stuff. And some are a little bit more nuanced than that. And some are pretty straightforward and very simply like, I was able to just change this one little part. Yeah, that was actually a pretty core, a part of the fantasy, right? It was like taking your car and turning it from like this old, junker, barely held together station wagon into something of like the weird science mobile. We kind of wanted to do that as well with the garage, where when you get to it, it's there's a couple things that may be separated out from a normal garage, but that is what it is. And then over time, it becomes a lot cooler. It becomes more of a fitting home for someone with that kind of station wagon.
So we've kind of been talking a lot about the car that we'll be driving. How about all of the anomalies that we'll kind of be facing off against? Can you tell us about any specific ones?
I think, we want to leave the high level for players to kind of encounter on their own. The bunnies are great. There's, a couple different types of them. They do slightly different things, but that was actually a very early idea, was this thing that is out there that attaches to your car. It can, hop on and stick, that you then have to, figure out how to get off, whether it's scrapping it or kicking it off or brushing it off with your car. Those are all different things that you can do to take care of it with different priorities. But it's been interesting because we've, when it comes to designing the anomalies, there's actually a good deal of work and iteration involved, because it is both something that you encounter on foot, but also, it's got to be fun in the car, right? And then, potentially have, different interactions with the world and the rules that we're setting up. And so, one of our designers, Richard, he definitely took point on figuring out all these different types and ways that they can they can create behaviors for the player, whether it's, getting chased or chasing, or creating obstacles to avoid. Like, that's, a big patch of radiation, right? There's nothing very complicated about that. It's going to be in the world. Once you figure out where it is and where its borders are, you can get around it. But we definitely have a couple that we've shown in various states where they're moment creators, right? And that was a big thing for us. Was, you know, I'm I've learned a lot about cars even since working on this project, but for me, my passion has always lied with stories that come from road trips and taking adventures, and creating a game that has the type of systems where players can have their own stories has been a very core part of the game for us. And some of these hazards and anomalies, they will do that without a doubt. They will definitely create some fun moments for players that, depending on the car, layout, equipment, randomization, time of day, weather, who knows, those stories are hopefully going to be different for everyone, which helps make their relationship with their car a little different.
And is there also going to be a main storyline in the game? You probably can't say too much about it, but I know that the organization called ARDA was doing a bunch of experiments and weird stuff kind of started to happen.
You're right. I'm not going to go too deep into that right now. You're right. Arda is an entity that is present within the zone walls. Their history and their relationship with the zone is part of what the player gets to uncover by playing the game. There is a critical path, like main story, for the player to participate in. They kind of, they end up on the other side of this wall. And there is a bit of a mystery surrounding this station wagon, and that mystery and kind of what gets caught up in it is the primary focus of that story. One of the early, or not early, it was probably around the midpoint through development, but we're looking at different ways and different types of stories that we could tell. And there is, the zone is it's a weird thing, right? Because it's a not necessarily, positive or negative. Obviously it has, changed the landscape and there are threats within it. But it's not a bad guy, right? It is the constant threat, and it has threats in it. But it's not actively, trying to hurt you. And initially, some of our early plot and story ideas were focused on, let's tell the story of the zone, right? And very, very early, we ended up switching to, let's tell a story of the zone, which is great because it keeps the zone what it is. And we put all kinds of hints and clues as to, the nature of the space and what's going on and what has happened. And that's not to say it's not an important story, but it is not the end all be all for the zone itself. And that helped us focus in on the station wagon and the mystery that is associated with it.
And I think something that kind of ties into that is the first person point of view in the game. You're not seeing your character, so there's more mystery to it maybe. What was it like making that decision whether you should have first person or third person, especially in a driving game?
I think for us, there's a strong reason to do it this way, which is we really care about connecting the player with the car. And a big part of that is interacting with all those different parts within inside, like the driver's seat, right? All the different displays and devices, and focusing on that one experience means that we can do things that you couldn't do from a third person without completely changing the nature of the game. And so very early on, it was a focus of like, no, we're going to put the player in the driver's seat, and now we get to play with all these fun little gadgets and stick them all over the place. That was a core part of the design. And to that comes with like accepting responsibility for making sure that feels great, as well as that there are options to help people that may have slight discomfort with that, right? There's a lot of little nuanced things that go into trying to make that feel as good as we possibly can. And that if we were splitting our focus or compromising on that part of the game design, we wouldn't be able to provide that quality. But it is a core part of the game for sure, is that you're in that seat, that you get to interact with these devices.
And how about the game's controls? I know you're launching on PlayStation and PC, so is there any difference between, controller and keyboard and mouse? Have there been any challenges implementing both control schemes? Is one easier than the other, maybe?
We care a lot about the controller experience. We also care a lot about the mouse and keyboard experience. on the PlayStation 5, there's like all the fancy features and different haptics that we can take advantage of, and we've started to play with those, and that's going well. And on the PC, you obviously have it's the true PC experience, right? Everything is customizable. And so that's everything with obligatory asterisks, right? But that's the advantage of it, right? Is that people have their keyboard, their mouse, and they can configure that exactly how they want. And so we've been definitely taking care to support both. And I'd go as far as to say, even when it comes to the individual controls, like there's logic to make sure that it feels good on both ends.
Awesome. And will Pacific Drive have difficulty settings?
I don't know where we're going to land on like a traditional difficulty settings, but we are trying to make sure that we have exposed enough around like general accessibility to let players pick how they want to experience the game. TBD on what exactly that list looks like, but from our standpoint, we believe firmly in the gates are open, come on in kind of standpoint to that. Like if you want to, this is an example. I don't know if this will be one that actually goes in, but if we want to say, hey, don't stress about gas anymore, click the button that says car goes without gas. Like we would do that because we don't care. Like if that's like the preferred experience for you, great. So that's our general standpoint, but we're aiming to have like a handful of those kind of features there.
Nice. Now, I know you guys went to a couple different events this year to show off the game, so what was your experience like there, and how did the public react to finally being able to play Pacific Drive?
I mean, it was overwhelmingly positive. Like it was the first time that we really let a bunch of people go in and just check out the game. And so the chunk of the game that we had put up for like the playable stations at GDC and at PAX was, we wanted to fast track people into the game as quick as possible. So we just started you in a map with the car, gave you a couple items, and said go. Um, and like I said, the people were having a great time. I got to see all different types of gamers check out the game, and I wasn't even at all the shows for the most part. I got pulled away on a couple things, but from what I was seeing, people were having a great time. They were surprising us a little bit with some of the things that they've tackled, and encountering new anomalies and figuring out how those worked. And it was a really positive first showing. Like we were very, very happy coming away from that.
That's really great to hear. I'm pretty jealous of all the people that got to try the game. I guess kind of going along with showing the game to the public, have there been any funny bugs that you or the team have encountered when creating this game?
Oh yeah. I mean, the running joke is just we see something that we don't know what is causing it, and it's up. That's another anomaly. But yeah, that happens a lot. It's a card game, it's a physics game, and we're a small team. Like there's inevitably strangeness going on. It is not too. It's obviously as we get closer to ship, it's becoming less frequent. But early on, there was definitely a lot of, and the car has shot off into the vista and distance, and now we got to figure out why. But strangeness with the car, strangeness with some of the anomalies, um, definitely has created some pretty funny moments. And then, like all games, there's all kinds of weird bugs that we go, okay, this is only happening under this one specific condition. Time to figure out why. Time to figure out what's going on. It's always a puzzle when it comes up. Sometimes more frustrating, I think, than not. But you definitely get some fun ones in there. I think driving physics in general has been a particularly big complicated thing, right? Because you think about, all right, most car games, it's a racing game, right? So we want 100 different cars to feel different on the racetrack, and we can all tune it to real life models or maybe idealized arcade versions of those models. Or it's a game like GTA or Watch Dogs, where it's a real life or an approximation of real life, where it's got, well, we got station wagons and we've got sports cars and maybe an APC and all kinds of different vehicles there, and those all need to feel diverse and different. But for us, it's one car that has to feel awesome, but then you can strap a bunch of different stuff to it, and you can change the engine, you can swap all the tires, and it's still got to feel good, but you still got to be noticeably feeling like you're improving. And that's a very unique problem to try to tackle when it comes to that aspect of like vehicle tuning and handling, and comes with its own share of fun bugs on its own.
Are there any games or other forms of media that have influenced Pacific Drive that people might not expect?
I mean, it really depends on and how much people as a general concept are aware of some of our inspirations. Big fans of the Stalker game series. The movie Stalker, the 1979 film was awesome. Um, the Annihilation, the Southern Reach trilogy, like that's a fantastic read that kind of an alternate take on like an exclusion zone story. Um, I think, it was great to look at any game that had car stuff that wasn't about racing or about just like an open world game. So it's sometimes it's little moments. Like I was just blown away with the quality of the Uncharted 4 sequence where you're driving a truck. Like that, we what we did is when we were trying to look at like how do we want our car to handle, we looked at all these different feels for all these different car games and we're like, okay, this is great, this is arcadey but only in this one scenario, this is super realistic, there's a lesson that we can take from this but we don't want to annoy our players, let's avoid X, Y, and Z. So I think there's definitely a pretty big list of various car games that we've at least looked at. um Other media that has affected things, there is this take on strange things in the Pacific Northwest, right? Like yeah, I'm a huge X-Files fan, and like there's a handful of game or stories and episodes from X-Files that are all set in the Northwest. There's that like a bunch of other car games that, like My Summer Car, right? That is like doubling down on like the heavy interaction with like hand doing every screw and every bolt, and like the relationship you have with vehicles in My Summer Car is beautiful. It's a wonderfully complicated thing full of all kinds of silliness. um but past that, like nothing is super jumping to mind. I think for me personally it was definitely like certain memories I have. Like I grew up in the Northwest. I grew up in Portland. And I'd drive like actually at the time I was driving a Volvo station wagon, and, making road trips with my friends out to the beach and going camping. There's a couple of great trails around the area. There's the Iron Goat Trail, which is a trail that it goes up a big hill and then it goes along a train track. And on one end is this old abandoned tunnel that is one of the spookiest things I've ever stood in front of in my life. And then if you go enough along the train track, you have all this weird concrete that is like holding up the landscape. And eventually there's a collapsed snow cover, where they actually built like a half tunnel, to protect the railroad from avalanches and heavy snow. But it's all exposed on one side. So if you stand inside, there's this wonderful juxtaposition of vibrant green nature and like old concrete and train tracks. But a lot of that was really influential to me. One of the things that I'm really proud of, especially with, where things sit in the game right now, is like the feel of the space is really, really great. Like if you were to just drive out into a map, sit in the car, let the rain go, turn on the wiper blades, flick on the radio, like listen to the tunes. It's pretty special. And that's for me, like emotionally very gratifying. That's nailing that is huge. And it harkens back to those drives that I was having when way before Ironwood ever existed, where I was just out on the road on my own, driving around in the rain. What's fun is just when that shifts and how that shifts, right? Where I've turned this corner and, oh, what is that glowing out in the woods? Or what is that looming out of the fog? Like these are, I don't know. I love those moments as well. So I'm a big fan of how that's turning out.
And that was the interview. I have a bunch of links in the description to Ironwood's social media. They have a Discord server, and you can also go wishlist Pacific Drive right now. And if this video wasn't enough, you're in luck because I have even more videos about the game.